about purpose, because it's something that comes up a lot with clients and in our respective businesses. So welcome, Ashley.
Hi.
Hello. So if we dive right into this, in your opinion, what do you think is most important to talk about regarding purpose, either in terms of what people overlook or miss or misunderstand? So just from your own experience a little bit, because I know we talk about this a lot. What do you think is most
Yeah.
important to start with around purpose?
Well, I think that it's something that people get really hung up on, and they feel like they decide that they're lacking a purpose and that they're separate from purpose, and that they make it their mission to go and logically figure out and solve purpose as a problem. So what I see happening is that people end up getting more and more stuck. They get more and more frustrated, and it seems as though people get themselves like into a tailspin with it. So my
Mm,
intention here today is to bring in some different perspectives and some different viewpoints about purpose, because I tend to see it and talk about it in a very, very different way that makes it simpler, less convoluted, with a goal of also helping people experience more purpose, like right now, not once they have it figured it out. Right? Because I think people think, oh, once I have my purpose figured out, that's going to be the one answer and the thing that's just going to solve it all. And it's like, maybe not.
so let me ask this then. In your opinion, how would you define purpose? Because sometimes I think
So,
that even
yeah,
like defining that sometimes can be interesting.
I'd like to have us both define it just so that we can maybe play with two definitions or see if
Sure,
we might come up
sure,
with a
sure,
new one together here.
sure. Yeah.
I see it as the impact that we're making on the world and on the people around us, on the environment around us, especially if we see ourselves as energy and if we look at ourselves as energetic beings. We can even think that just by holding that intention or that energy, that we're having an impact on the environment and the people around us. And so I think that it's really having a sense of purpose, because purpose is really about a fulfill, like a feeling or a sensation, right?
Yes, yes,
So I think
yes.
that if we look at it as a feeling and a sensations, I think that it's really the awareness, like as a human being, as a consciousness, the awareness of that impact that you're making, and being able to stand back as the viewer of your reality and feel really satisfied and feel like, ooh, I really like who I'm being, and I like how it feels when I get to notice that I'm making this kind of impact on my environment. That to me is in a nutshell like the experience of purpose.
Okay, for me, I think one of to follow up on something you said there, I think purpose is ultimately a state of being, I think. So purpose is looking at it and saying that something that brings us fulfillment in life, that's energizing, something that when we're actively engaged in it,
Mhm.
fills our tank, doesn't just empty it energetically.
Mm,
So I think that ultimately everything that we really want in life is because of the way we anticipate it will make us feel. So with that in mind, I think purpose typically isn't a static thing. So somebody might say, okay, my purpose is to, I don't know, build $1 million company or something. But then when they get to
right.
that, then it's like, oh shit, well now that's done. Now what? So purpose is really kind of a fluid thing. And one of the things that I've heard in the past, which makes a lot of sense to me, is almost looking at it in the sense of there's an inner mission and there's an outer mission. So
Mhm.
I think that if and the one that I really think is the most important with that is that inner mission, because sometimes I think about it can be about impact on the world or something like that. But it's often like, well, what does that do for you? So I often it's
Mhm.
about, well, what do I want to be experiencing myself? And then what can I create in the world that helps other people, that reaches those goals? But it's very important that it's filling your own tank too. So I think purpose is kind of
Totally.
that it's not static, it's fluid, it'll change, um, and it really has to be something that fills your. Oh, my screen went black. Can you still see me?
Yeah, I could see you.
Okay, my screen went black there for some reason.
Hmm.
So I think purpose isn't is and it's not an external thing. That's another important thing as well. And if you are defining it through something external, it's very important to have a clear understanding of internally why
Mm.
why that's
Mm.
important. which is then this bigger thing, which I talk about a lot, which is these three words: being, meaning your state of being, then what you're doing, and you're having. So if we think about that, right, being is all of it. So what do I mean by it's all of it is that your state of being is driving what you will do and what you won't do. And then what you do or don't do defines what you have or don't have. But I think that something that's to me is a bit kind of messed up is often how that order of being, doing, being, driving, doing, driving, having is mixed up, where it's almost like without the purpose part, which is connected to the being, without that, then it almost becomes, well, my being isn't okay, meaning I don't feel motivated, I don't feel excited. But if I can push myself to do X, Y, and Z, then I'll have this stuff. And then at some point, magically, I'll I'll arrive, like when,
Mhm.
if it's an actor, when I get that role, or when it's somebody in a corporate job, when I get that promotion, or the corner office, or whatever it might be, that almost like looking, or when I have the family or whatever it might be, almost like these ideas that it might not be okay now, but if I do a bunch of stuff, I'll have a bunch of stuff, and suddenly like that thing will be there. So I think with the purpose, it's almost being a bit more deliberate
Mhm.
and looking at it in the beginning and saying, well, what is that state of being that I ultimately want? Is it freedom? Is it creative expression? Like, is it, you could probably give other ideas, some other ideas for that. But I think like with that purpose thing, it brings us back to actually being intentional. And then I think when we've got that purpose about how we actually want to be experiencing life, and I know this is very long now, Ashley, but looking at it
Mhm.
and saying that, then we can start with the end in mind. Then it becomes about, well, are my relationships supporting that, right? Or are they actually holding me back from that? Is the work
Mhm.
that I'm doing, is it supportive of that, or is it holding me back? We can begin to actually be a bit more intentional, because if not, it can be unintentional, but hoping that at some point in the future it'll just suddenly sort itself out. So I think purpose comes back to, what state of being do you really want, and then looking at, well, what gives you that state of being, you know
I like what you're saying about how typically people are making things like so far off and like, oh, well,
one day hopefully.
one day I have it. And so I see people do that a lot with purpose. And initially when because this was my like coaching niche for a lot of years when when I started in the career space. And
Yep.
so it came up a lot, and I would see that people would say, well, I'm creating this business so that one day then I'll have all of this money and then I'll get to fulfill a purpose because I'm going to have all this money to give to like orphans and like feed every person on the planet. And it's
But
like,
it's over there, but
but
it's
it's
over
over
there.
there, and it's like
Yeah.
I can't have that purpose. And so but the thing is like I get that it feels really good to feel that in the moment. But you and I like to talk about tiny habits and having it be
Yeah.
something that, well, what's like the smallest expression of it? So I really like to think about purpose like separate from your career, separate from just like what you're doing or what you will do one day when you make money, and really think about it as something like, well, how can I just make an impact on the people that I'm interacting with today, with my friends, with my family, with
Mm.
even sort of like with through the intention
With
when I'm
what's here
going,
now, with what's here now.
yeah,
Yeah.
in a small way. Like, so
Mm.
for me, for instance, like I feel a sense of purpose, like if I know that I'm like radiating and creating from love, and if I'm like really reminding other people, right, that like of their worthiness and how loved they are, and to like go shine a little bit brighter and a little bit weirder in the world by being themselves. So like I really focus on bringing that intention into my interactions and with people, and have it be something that's like just like a practice of gratitude, where
Yes.
it's something that I know that the purpose starts with me, and that just from me setting that intention for myself of who I want to be in the world and how I hope that it impacts other people, I really set off this energy of purposefulness. I get into the frequency of purpose, which is I think is really what you and I talked about how we want to shift this conversation, is that we get to choose it, that it's a state of being that we're going to put ourselves in, and then from that point attract the people, places, situations, opportunities that allow us to express more of that in bigger and different ways.
I agree with that. So before we wrap up, then I think, why don't we look at some quick, and like we said, tiny habits, quick things that
Mhm.
people can do to help get them either reconnected to maybe a purpose that they've forgotten. Actually, before I finish that thought, sometimes what I see a lot of is when people are motivated, right? Initially, it means that they have it's somehow when there's motivation there, there's a thought of the what the being would be like
Mhm.
at the achievement of whatever that thing is, or when that experience happens. And then the byproduct of that is, well, the energy to go after it. Like that's the byproduct of it. But then I find that sometimes then when people get into the nitty gritty of the work part of it, it's almost like they're no longer looking at the goal, or connecting to the energy of the goal. It's more about, oh shit, like there's now I got all these steps to, like someone might have a fitness goal or a weight loss goal or something. And they're excited about it. Like New Year's resolutions is an example of this, right?
Mhm.
And then it's almost like, oh, but then once it gets into like the actual practical steps of it, it's almost like, oh man, that's really hard. And why is that? Because we're no longer connecting with the outcome, we're now giving all of our
Mhm.
attention to the steps. And believe it
Right.
or not, it's not super motivating to just take a bunch of steps just because it seems like it's supposed to be a good idea. It's not very motivating, is it? So I think that what you mentioned there about connecting to the energy or the frequency of the outcome is the way to solve that piece that I'm just talking about there. So that then I'm taking action inspired by the energy of the outcome.
Mhm.
Or, and also that's the practical element, but also that we see the world through the lens of our being. Like on a day where you're feeling depressed, suddenly everything around you seems to lean towards confirming that you're right to feel that way. So sometimes it is almost about, and Neville Goddard, we've talked about this a lot, actually, right? There's that line, the secret is assuming the feeling of the wish fulfilled, right? But our
Yes.
ego doesn't like that because it's like, no, no, you don't get to feel good yet. Like that's over there. But when you're not feeling good, what's your fuel for getting over there? And some people might say, oh, it's anxiety or it's anger or something like that. But great, good luck sustaining that.
Mhm.
So I think that in a healthy way. So anyway, back to the finishing the other thought. So I think let's give people a couple of practical things about how they might check in with that, either find that purpose or connect to that purpose daily, or maybe both. Have you got something for
I
that?
yeah, I actually have some journal prompts for people that want to explore this deeper, so we could probably find a way to link those in here somehow. Because my big thing is be curious, hold some curiosity around
Mm,
purpose and around your self-discovery. But ultimately, I always like to give the metaphor of like a car with its headlights on, and as you drive down the road, you might only see a little bit of what's in front of you, and
mm,
that you have to keep driving to gather more pieces. So there is a sense of, for many people, a phase of self-discovery, we'll call it, just like with like the caterpillar cocooning itself before it becomes a butterfly, that be gentle and don't feel like that you have to like get there and it's some destination, because it is going to evolve. And trust me, you're you're going to go back and like explore this again at another point, like when you've changed, when you've grown. So just allow the process to be fun, but take some sense of action or some sense of like go out there and play with it in the world, go out there and experience it in the world. So if you start to notice, right, that you really might be really interested helping people that are homeless or something, right, like maybe you're like, oh, I feel really inspired by that, then you might think, oh well, you know what, something I could do today is I could put together like a list, of things, or gather some things around my house that I'm not using, and like go and drop that off and go and see how that feels. And maybe when they go there, they see a flyer and there's something else that allows them to kind of volunteer and work more directly in a soup kitchen feeding the homeless. And so I feel like things come together in little phases like that. So I always just tell people like that you're going to learn more if you kind of get a little spark of inspiration, and that you just go and just go and experience it, go and try it, and then based on the sensations you have in your body, using that as the feedback system to see, do I want to explore this further, or do I want to go try something else? So I think that that's like the first like tangible actionable thing I would give them.
I like that a lot. I think that to piggyback on something you said there, I really think that the curiosity is supremely important, because I think in our logical minds, we might have an idea of what it should be, that purpose. But the
Mhm.
truth is, you really might not give a shit about the thing that you should give a shit about. And we can
Yes.
be upset about that, but what difference does that make? Like, it's about, am I so I think that curiosity is an interesting thing, which, and to go back to what you said also about the body, if there's something we're doing, it's actually being aware too. Like, how do being present and saying, how do I feel about this thing? So if there's
Yeah.
things you're doing through your day, it's almost like taking a moment to be present and say, like, how do I feel about this? Right? Because then if you start following those things that feel good for you, it begins then to lead you, like you're saying with the flyer and such, like, towards those things, onto that path of greater fulfillment and greater enjoyment.
Mhm.
But
Mhm.
we've so often been conditioned to almost shut that part down and just get through it. So what I'm
Yeah.
saying here is, let's not just get through it. Sometimes it's about looking at and also actually, so there's that, there's following what feels good, right?
Mhm.
And taking the time to notice what feels good, which sounds obvious, right? But sometimes we're on to the next thing before, and we're not really where we are. But another part of that I would say too is about, be willing to try new things without attachment to the outcome. That is, in
Mhm.
fact, what I would say is the most important one. Because I mean, in my life, like, I've gone through a few career changes in my life.
Oh, yeah.
And the difficult thing is almost about, I remember coming to a point about, well, there's no point me trying that or learning that, because I can't see all the way to the ending and to see what's going to happen at the end of it, what security there is, like what the outcome is going to be like, what the experience is going to be like. So I'm just not going to bother with that. Right. And then it's
Yes.
almost then like tying yourself up in a knot. So what I would say is about, if nothing changes, then nothing changes, right? So sometimes it can be about, even on a small degree or level, can I pick out an audiobook about someone that inspires me and listen to that? Something that's going to put new ideas into my head. Or can I
Mhm.
join a club, or is there some activity that I can do? And on the smallest level, so that it's not overwhelming. So that then what you're actually doing is, you're bringing new things into your consciousness.
Mhm.
But then it's also that part I just mentioned a few minutes ago about being aware to the effect that that's having. The number of times where I'll talk to people and I'll say, well, how was that? And they're like, oh, I don't know. And you're like, what do you mean you don't know? And like, oh, I just wasn't, I don't know, just, I don't know. And I'm like, well, how can it be? And it's like, oh, because it might be like, I'm not really there paying attention to that. I'm in my judgments of it, or I'm onto what needs to be happening, or what I'm missing, or something. So doing new things, right?
Mhm.
Being curious, and knowing that the purpose of doing those things, there's the purpose word again. The purpose
Mhm.
of them is to see how the experience is for you. That is the purpose.
Mhm.
The
Mhm.
purpose isn't to get all the way over to this place over here. Like, for instance, if somebody wanted to climb a nearby mountain, would it make sense to say, I'm not going to bother with that, I'm going to go straight to Mount Everest, first ever mountain, I'm going to go straight to that? Would that make sense? Probably not. It's probably like, let me try something that's a much smaller commitment and see in my body, do I even enjoy that? Because if it
Mhm.
gets to go climb Mount Everest and I don't even know if I like climbing mountains, I don't even know what I'm doing, you're not probably not setting yourself up for success in multiple ways. So sometimes it's about getting the ego out the way and being willing to start small and being open minded, right? And yeah, that's more than a couple of tips there. That's my input on
Yeah.
that.
I would also say that just like people have a gratitude practice, that
Yes.
if purpose is your focus, then maybe write down a list, of 10 things that make you feel purposeful. And just like the practice of, with gratitude, being grateful for the things that you already have or it already exists in your life, what you've already experienced. Also being grateful for the things that you haven't even experienced yet, which I know is always like, can be a tricky one for people when they first start out. But I do think that if you just start to focus your intention and really teach your body what the sensation of purpose feels like, you're going to recognize it a lot more when you're out there in the world or when things are happening, because it'll happen in like these small moments through conversations that are brought to you with people where you're like, oh wow, I really get a lot of satisfaction around using my specific skills and talents and helping people in this way. It's going to show up very organically. Like, we live in a intelligent, conscious universe. And so when you ask for things and when you set the intention, things are going to come back at you in a variety of different ways. And your feedback system, your emotions in your body, once you've connected with what that sensation is, you're going to know, you're like, ooh, there's something here for me to pay attention to. So I think that just a simple like daily practice like that, since I know that we've been teaching people daily practices with one of our recent courses, like about reality creation, by just spending that little bit of time in the morning. You could do this in like 3 to 5 minutes easily at the beginning of your day.
I think that's an important thing too, because another thing that the ego might do is say, I don't have time for that. Right.
Right.
So I think that it's about starting, and earlier we talked briefly about tiny habits, is about starting at the smallest possible level, right? So that you can actually begin to move some things. But this is really about getting intentional. That's really what's underneath all of this, getting intentional. Rather out of the autopilot of doing more of the same. Unless more of
Mm-hmm.
the same is working absolutely fabulously for you, then keep going. However, if there's room for improvement or something that you want to adjust, it's about coming back to that, taking that time for yourself, and not necessarily going and asking someone else, what should I aim for or something. It's about that time. About definitely in the morning, and last thing at night is the windows of the greatest degrees of natural suggestibility, meaning that we're more impressionable in those times. So in the morning, taking that time before that critical mind really gets up to speed, and doing some of these practices. What are we grateful for? That's important. And then beginning to also notice about what can I do today that brings me, that feels good, that brings me joy. Starting small with that. Anyway, there we go. So this is our first one through this platform. So hopefully everyone's
Did
enjoyed
it
this. Yeah,
did it just change to like it looks like it's showing me a mobile phone now and then it got
it's the same on
vertical.
my end. It's the same on my end.
Did it change to that?
No,
Huh.
looks same as it was in the beginning for me.
Oh, really? It
Yeah.
just switched views for me over here, but always learning curves with these new platforms, you know?
Yes.
Mhm.
All right. So where can people find out more about you, Ashley?
If we go back, maybe in the comments, we can drop a link in and put the journal prompts in there for the purpose discovery, and that'll link them into like my world a bit.
All right then. Okay.
Yeah,
Cool. And if you'd like to see more of this, leave a comment and let me know what you got out of this video, and be happy to read your comments. Okay. Anything else, Ashley?
I feel complete. Thank you.
All right. So let me finish this. Mhm. I've clicked finish, but I think it takes a few seconds.